Zoom is moving everything on me today. The share button and the big bright green button in the middle anymore. All the other preferences are moved around. Welcome back, everybody.
Happy
For
New
folks
Year.
having a holiday.
Happy New Year.
So Tina, is the power holding out?
For now,
Fingers crossed.
it's normally fine. It was just a wide enough blip that all the speakers popped and just hoping it's not a harbinger.
Never go when the speakers all pop yet at once. Alrighty. I put the first action item on there as just a reminder to myself that I need to go back and still finish that up. That was an action item from the previous meeting. Haven't done it yet, so more of a note to self, but that's still on a to-do list. We're all going finish up that blob put, make that a little bit better, more better. Folks can complain or whatever on the PR when we get that out there. Um, let's see. I am guessing that Alexander, you wanted to chat about this next one here.
Yeah, so practically it's what I added. It's a long-standing issue. Unfortunately, I missed the deadline for 1.3 release, but I would like to get that PR merged later in the spec. So the background of this. So some time ago, Keir introduced the CPU affinity field in the OCI spec, but it was only added for the exec operation. This PR unifies the CPU's affinity settings for all the operations what is performed by the runtime. So for all steps and possibility to specify different ones like for the hooks and for other operations whatever runtime is performing. So just to make it more flexible and more well, covering all the functionality in the runtime, not only exec.
I don't have any comments on this one since I'm not a runtime maintainer. I think we've got Tian on here, and that might be it from that side.
All right. Well, it's just a reminder to everyone who can look, and if anyone have opinion, please have a look and add the comments because the review a bit stalled.
I like how you say this is a long-standing issue, and your point is something that's going from back in 2005, where, oh, the rest of us, if we were only that far back, we would be happy. That's probably a sign the runtime spec is better managed than some of the other ones.
You follow it all the way through. The original was 2024. But yeah, it's been a while.
I mean, I am pulling up stuff that we were chatting about 2 weeks ago, but then Shop 512 support. Let's see, I submitted that in 24, but that goes back to 2023 that we're going to chat about in a minute here. So we've got other stuff that's been out there for a while, but not on the runtime spec side, I don't think. I think they're a lot better. Dion, do you have anything you want to say on this one?
I don't think so. I think the most important people to review this are probably the runtime authors, like here, runtime maintainers.
Aren't you a runtime spec maintainer?
I'm a runtime spec maintainer. I mean, like actual
Oh, run
runtimes
C.
themselves. Yeah, like
Got
run
it.
C and cryo
C
and
run.
Z-run.
Okay.
And we have several of those in the runtime spec maintainers, but various levels of interaction.
Yeah.
And we did just come out of the holidays, so it's probably a decent time to poke on this again and say, hey, can we get some review again?
Well, that was my intention to come in today to the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Might be best. I don't know how much they go back and look at the recordings and notes on this meeting. Um, might be best just to hit them with a little chat message and say, hey, maintainers, uh, can we get a little extra set of eyes on this? Alrighty. Jory isn't here. I pinged her and she didn't respond back, so I don't know if we're gonna hear anything on that or not. So I'll put that down at the end of the list. Next up on the list was the whiteout file handling. So on this one, there was a question of what happens when there's a .wh dot in the layers, which that's just throwing a question there I don't think many of us have thought about before. Because for folks that need a refresher on the whiteouts, the .wh dot is supposed to have a name after it for which you want to have deleted. So you would have a .wh file one, or in a directory, a .wh and the file inside that directory. Um, but if there's nothing after it, we don't have anything that says what to do.
I think the quiet part that at least I'm afraid to say, I don't know if anyone else is afraid to say it. Maybe I'm projecting a little bit there, but I think everyone's afraid to say, what does AUFS do, where we stole this concept from? Because
What
this
does
isn't
AUFS?
something we made up. This is something that AUFS does that we adopted.
Do we know what AUFS does in this case?
We do
I was going to
not.
say something similar that we stole it and owned it now.
Yeah. And I think no one wants to say that because no one wants to read the AUFS source code.
Or start up an
Oh, good
old
times.
Ubuntu VM with AUFS installed and construct one.
Yeah.
We just say it's invalid and should be ignored. This file, I don't know about airing out. Doesn't really mean anything.
Leave the issue open with it's underspecified and will continue to be underspecified until someone does the work to test AUFS.
See, your mic's a little scratchy. Um, I mean, I think mostly it's relevant today because we just take the AUFS stuff and mostly just translate it directly into overlay. Since the AUFS drivers have pretty much all gone away now.
Yeah.
So however AUFS handled this before is probably irrelevant.
I was tempted to pull a on, make it into an image, and then throw it against a bunch of runtimes and see what happens.
Yeah, I wonder if there are any images that already contain some of these. I doubt it, but it's possible, right?
I mean, yeah, I mean something could have created images with or with an empty name or something. But yeah, my tendency on those cases is they're treat them as invalid images unless there's something that was clearly generating this and figure out what that bug was.
Yeah, Cypher is taking the view error on it, but he is not doing it right now. So
Just treat it as an opaque everything.
yeah,
Everything's
it's
gone.
a weird case though, because if you treat it as an opaque everything, first we do have a way to specify that in a directory where you do the .wh .opq. So you could have done that, but also why would you do that in the root of the file system rather than just starting from a clean slate without doing the whiteout?
Yeah, that just .wh dot on its own doesn't specify opaqueness anyways.
Yeah, but I mean, if the goal was to empty out the full file system of the image, why have files that you're whiting out in the first place? Why not just start from scratch?
Well, wouldn't that basically or white out an empty file?
So the
Probably
way
empty file.
Cypher was treating it was an opaque whiteout of the full file system. And so you start out with an empty file system.
Yeah, I'd be curious how other. Oh, don't even need to generate an image. We probably would be really easy to add a unit test case for that since we always translate it. I think on the community side, it's always going to get translated. I think the case will just write the whiteout or like write the files directly. Yeah, I don't think we ever would in Containerd.
It's definitely a weird use case.
Yeah, I say we could if it's something that has some ambiguous behavior, we could certainly add like a unit test around it in Containerd to see what it does. I guess I'm more curious when like is this just like when people come in and be like, hey, I came up with this weird case, like this weird edge case that doesn't solve, which I mean, I'm sure that's you could come up with those all day, but it's like, is this actually something that somebody's hitting? Or
I'm
just
wondering if they're writing an implementation of a runtime or something.
Yeah, my guess was they were writing something that parses whiteout files and notice that there's an edge case here. Because no existing tool would generate one of these files.
Shouldn't.
Shouldn't, certainly, yeah. And if it did, I think said tool would probably consider that a bug.
well, or worse. I mean, I'm just looking in the Containerd case, and because we'll strip the .wh dot, and then we'll end up with an empty file name. And then we'll create a path to that file name, which is now the parent of it. So, like, is there
Yeah, because
anything where you get unintended behavior where you're like changing the parent directory? Not really a security issue, which just could lead to like a weird.
Fun times there. leaving it open for now. We'll circle back whenever someone wants to start throwing runtime use cases at it and see what happens. TNON, it'll be a race between you and me to see who wants to put up a sample image.
Yeah, I think there's more edge cases here too that don't necessarily involve whiteouts.
Say more.
I'm wondering if you could construct a tar that has file names that are valid for tar, but not valid for, or I mean, even questionably valid for tar, but it's a file format, so you can shove whatever you want in there, but not valid for ext4. Doesn't seem super likely given that ext4 is very generous in what can go in a file name.
Can you have a file name that's empty? 0
You
bytes long?
can't, you cannot have a file name that's empty. That's the one case that I'm thinking might have some legs here, where this is technically the same case, right? Because we're talking about a whiteout file whose file name is empty. And I think you could make a tar header with an empty file name, and that would be a valid tar header. But whether that does anything is going to be implementation specific. So that's interesting.
Sounds like you're going to win the competition of creating the most breaking image out there for us.
Maybe.
Oh, and
I
Derek's
was
got a
just I was just saying I think Containerd will hit this case because it's going to try to see whether or not the whiteout is under the directory. And since the join is going to get to the directory itself with the path stripped, it's not going to be a prefix. The dir is going to have a slash and the original path is not.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, maybe, right? Oh, yeah. Yeah, because
That's
filepath.join
true.
will not put a separator at the end if original base is empty. Which, honestly, this would be my read of this issue is that it is an invalid whiteout name, right? Because an empty file name is not valid.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
But
You're
an
saying
empty
file
file
path.
name will be considered the directory, and that would,
yeah,
and then it'll get into this directory is not under that directory.
yeah.
But just kind of looking through this, if path is empty here, file path join is not going to put a slash in there.
It does not put a slash. I just confirmed that. We'll
Okay.
strip the ending slash. It does a path clean, I think.
And also the file path dir doesn't. It's going to assume it's a dot or a empty for the directory.
Um, Not sure. Are you saying it could be the parent directory in that case?
Just looking file path base and file path dir is pulling out the two halves of the parts of the file name there. For each of those, if you pass an empty string into it, I wonder what happens for both of them.
Not sure. Probably add more unit tests around that case. But
Yeah,
I think that 813 is the correct thing to do though, in that case.
I'd agree. I just want to make sure you actually get to that case.
Yeah, as I was saying, we can add some unit tests to make sure it does. We want.
Fun times. People are always breaking their code. It was right the first time, wasn't it?
Yeah, stop giving us edge cases.
So much easier without all those. All right, chugging along. Licensing headers. This is one of those things where we probably need Jory, and Jory is not here. I got the impression reading Jory's comment that we just need a generic header gets thrown in the top of the file. I was hoping that had the actual header itself in there. This is sitting here in kind of a draft state. And it looked like they also were trying to push a contributors file, which I don't think we need. And then otherwise you have this thing at the top. I suspect we actually need to fill in those two fields. The date when that file was first created, and then the copyright owners contributors to the distribution spec, or yeah, most likely it's distribution spec contributors. I feel like this is bigger than just distribution spec though, so that's another reason to bring it up here. It does need to be done
Yeah, it should be
across all the
consistent
specs.
across it. Or could it be the what do we call the technical community or whatever? What's the TDC or whatever?
Yeah,
TDC or TOP?
No, like
thinking
it's supposed to be the whole technical community. Like, I know in Containerd we say the authors of Containerd, which
TDC is the language in the charter. It's the technical developer community.
was that just a funny way of phrasing maintainers?
well,
It's
it's supposed to be
ambiguous.
contributors as well, though, right?
Yeah, it's not restricted to just maintainers. I think the definition in the charter is pretty ambiguous.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, the copyright's kind of a bit ambiguous as well. It's just supposed to cover everybody who's contributed.
Mhm. That's why I'm thinking there
I
is.
think most projects use an authors, like the spec authors or something. Yeah, like that.
So any of these I think would be valid for us. And so that's where I'm thinking, distribution spec contributors or authors. I kind of like contributors. But do that, but not this individual file. The file implies that if you don't remember to put your name in here, that you're not a contributor. And I feel like it's a lot easier just to look at the Git history to see who contributed.
Yeah, is that a standard
I think
format for that?
I think people do frequently maintain a contributors file or an authors file. That doesn't necessarily have to include everyone. Brandon, you're right that like the most accurate thing is going to be the Git history. The justification that this PR author wrote there, which I think is reasonable, is to call out organizational ownership. Like they're saying that they're the author, but their employer is the copyright holder. That's true for a lot of. They say it in the context of German employment, but that's true for a lot of the context of American employment contracts too. That usually work for hire is copyright of the employer, not the employee.
I'm wondering how that works with the DCO and the sign-off statement that we've got.
I mean, the DCO is a certification that you are allowed to contribute this code, right? So I'm saying I certify when I sign off that I am permitted to contribute that code, and it's then up to me to determine what that, how do I know that I'm permitted to do it, right? It's not up to the project to determine whether the contributor is permitted to contribute the code. It's up to the contributor to determine that and to certify that they are.
I want to click that link, but I'm not going to click it right now, Dan.
It's related to copyright.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
And it's actually very relevant to what we're discussing. Because license and copyright are two very different things. Because the copyright of the code without copyright assignment is still held by the original author of the code. But as soon as you have more than one author of a particular bit of code, it gets really muddy very quickly. Hence the
It's also not
suggestions.
necessarily the author. I mean, you said without assignment, but assignment can happen via an employment contract,
Sure, yeah.
right? So
But this
if
is
I'm writing like code for work, Google has the copyright to that. I don't have the copyright to that.
right, yes. But this is why projects tend to use these umbrella statements, because expressing all of that copyright nuance accurately and maintaining it over time would be impossible. Like if every PR had to then update like a complex expression that stated which bits of code are copyrighted by which entity, this would be unmaintainable.
Yeah,
Even if we didn't do that and just said, hey, add your entry to the contributor list and your code is somewhere in there at some point in the Git history, that's going to cause a lot of commit conflicts, merge conflicts.
Yeah, I think the Git metadata tracks that. I don't think we need to track that. We just need to recognize that not anyone can take this code and do whatever they want with it. They can't claim that they wrote it.
Yeah. I'm just thinking back to the original thing of, do we need this contributors file at all? And the comment was, well, some people are contributing on behalf of their organization, not as themselves individually. I'm going to take the opposite view that I don't think we need to care.
Yeah,
And that whether it's an organization or an individual, they are a contributor to the distribution spec project. And we that contributor is ambiguous as to whether or not it's an individual or organization.
I think this is honestly something where it would be good to have input from LF Legal.
Fair point.
I agree that the Git metadata is going to be the most accurate thing. I don't know if everyone has that same guidance from, their their appropriate legal organization.
But that's why the Linux Foundation maintains that associations link with people and their company and the dates between them so that they can look at the contributions by individual and see what company that they were at the time. Because yes, you might work for somebody one day, but is it on the commit date? That company would be depending on who you were employed and the date that you committed that. Like it
but
can
it's
get
And the
even
complicated
date
more
based on the deal.
complicated than that, because some employers would not assume the copyright of all code that you write, and some employers would not assume the copyright of code that you write on your free time.
Yeah. I was about to say, what time of day, what machine are you using?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but it's more for a reference for the legal whatever entities to do that lookup when it's relevant
yeah,
because it's almost never relevant except for when the patent trolls come along and they want to see who's actually what companies are actually writing this code.
yeah.
I feel like this last paragraph here, and this is the LF's statement on it, that they don't list all the copyright holders. Now they say for contributions to every file, but I feel like this is kind of covering that contributors file, which is, if we're looking for the LF legal statement on it, I feel like this is pretty much it.
But you do have to maintain, if you copy a file from one project to another and make changes, you do have to maintain the original copyright.
Yes. So don't change someone else's copyright without permission.
Gotcha.
But what they're saying is you don't have to list every copyright holder in a file as each individual person is making a contribution, or maybe someone's changes all get deleted. They're still historically part of the file, even though they don't have any current lines in there. All that gets very complicated and convoluted, and so LF is just saying, no, you just assign it to the whole project.
So I just
Even the
pasted a
slashing down
link
here.
here. I just pasted a link here, which is what my employer's guidance is for this. But that's why I was saying, like, I think LF legal is going to have an answer that is appropriate.
Now, we're definitely not asking for a CLA.
No, we're not. So that there's no CLA that is relevant here, and there's also no copyright assignment to LF or to OCI that is relevant.
I'm going to take the spec reading of this and say maybe is not a must. Yeah. And in general, my fear is just knowing our projects and the way they go. If we have a pull request or something that's been sitting out there for months and the contributor is no longer available and we get a merge conflict on this, then we can't take any of the contribution until we resolve the merge conflict. That just adds more headaches on us. So given that they're saying over here that they don't require communities to maintain a list of every holder, I feel like that's covering it from the LF standpoint. But we can defer, ping LF, see what they have to say. No one wants to be a lawyer today, other than all of us. Okay. Jeff, you've been super patient. Let's chat about yours. I think that was the only other one on the list, right? Unless Joy shows up for the TOB stuff. Multiple tags. You want to chat about that?
Uh, yeah, I would love to. I'm somewhat wondering what the history is on this, if there's any history on this. But essentially coming out of the idea of it's really inefficient and there's just a lot of HTTP round tripping if you want to set multiple tags on a manifest. And also there's not currently in spec a way to specify a digest and a tag at the same time. So if you want to upload a, SHA-512 or a Blake 3 manifest, and then you want to add a tag, most registry right now would be rehashing that as SHA-256, since you can't specify the digest and the tag at the same time. So this kind of provides a way for that. But then if you are uploading, multiple tags according to the same digest, you can kind of do this in all of one go. And hopefully a way that makes this efficient and kind of easy to implement, easy to fall back. I don't know. It seemed like it made a lot of sense. It seemed fairly straightforward to implement. I know it would be for us. So I didn't know if there's any historical reasons why something like this does not exist, or what past efforts might be around this. But yeah, that's kind of the basis of it. Tianan has more information if you want to know.
Sound of the bus going over me. No, I agree. I push a lot of tags. A lot of tags. And the round trip to US East 1 is insane because AWS sucks. Yeah. And so anything to reduce that round trip would be phenomenal because the work the registry's doing for these tiny requests is tiny and can be amortized across all these tags, but only if they're in one request.
Well, I think to your point, though, like the registry does do validation, but it has to do the exact same validation every single time a new tag is pushed. If you want to validate that layers exist, you can do that validation once and then write the tag multiple times or write multiple tags versus every time a new request comes in, you have to repeat the exact same validation. So it does save a lot of work on the registry, less overall API calls to help with rate limiting issues, a lot faster in terms of saving a lot of round trips. So I think in other conversations, like there's definitely more pure HTTP ways to do this by like introducing a patch endpoint or something similar. Um, just from my experience here, trying to introduce a new API endpoint and getting buy-in on that is probably much more overhead than just, hey, optionally support there being another query parameter kind of a thing. But yeah, that's the basis of that. Happy to put up a PR to kind of give some things to talk about with this. Can try to actually put this in on Docker Hub as like a thing that we support, just to kind of show, hey, this is what it looks like in practice if we need to have like an example of it ahead of time. But obviously, clients don't necessarily support it. So
It kind of inverts the idea that I was pushing a while back from the flip side. And so we've got 494 from way back when someone was saying, hey, how do we support other algorithms for this specific case when you're pushing the manifest? And so I've got one sitting out here from back in the day when we were first talking about it that went the opposite direction, which was passing an extra field in there with a digest algorithm parameter. So you would push the tag, or in this case, the blob, if you've got something in there. So the blob would have a digest algorithm for something that's computing a digest algorithm. For the tag, I would support, where was it? The digest parameter on top of the tag. This just inverts that, and there's a lot of value to what you're doing by inverting it. So it's an interesting alternate take there. The only thing I can think of that might bite us with this is if you couldn't push all the tags. What if you can push 2 tags but not all 3? Do you send back an error per tag? Do you reject the entire request?
yeah, I think there's some of that is probably a TBD. I mean, I think you can obviously send back kind of like a success of these tags were successful. Maybe that it's a case where there's not really an error reason if one of them fails. So you might just have to repush the one that failed or repush the ones that fail one by one to get a specific error message. Um, I don't know. Haven't thought about that one.
So I jump in there.
Is there guarantees on atomicity of multiple pushes? So, for example, let's say you push 10 tags at a time. Let's say you're in process of processing, let's say, the fifth tag, and someone else comes in and then pushes, let's say, the tag that you haven't processed yet. And then, so what are the guarantees here? Like, is the assumption that each tag push is going to be overwritten, or like is it an atomic operation?
I think that's a good question. Um, I think naively, I would probably do it as I don't know, whichever one is last is going to be the one to do that. Also, I would say just don't. I know that doesn't always fly. I mean, yeah, there's definitely a case there where theoretically something could happen. I don't know what we could dive into to see how to prevent that. If that edge case is so small that it's not necessarily worth handling in a better way other than th this is what you did. I don't know.
So in that scenario, though, each tag is still going to point to that individual hash. You're just worried about someone else pushing a different tag and what order you go in. We got the problem today, right?
Yeah, right now you only push one tag. So in this case, the last one wins. But if you have multiple tags, then half of the tags can point to one manifest, and let's say the other half can point to something else completely. And yeah, that I don't know if that's in the spirit of like you return an API operation with success and you assume that it's done immediately, and then you find out that it's not.
Yeah, I kind of
So it's like half
look good and
success,
think,
like
yeah,
in
but
the current case, it's either a full success or a full failure, as in like you get overwritten completely or you don't. But in this multiple case, you can have half successes, which is weird.
but I feel like you could have a half success today. You could be pushing the digest and three tags. Someone else could be pushing their digest and three tags.
Mhm.
And you could get out of order between which one was first on each individual tag.
Yes, but a single individual API will either be a success or failure.
Yeah. And in this case, the creation of all the tags wouldn't be successful. You just don't know if someone else overrode it the second after you pushed it.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you have the same problem either way. It just now you might actually have a way to catch it, whereas before you wouldn't in a way.
And I
Like you
feel
could
like,
actually update them in transactionally or something and then actually error and say, hey, someone else is trying to update these, whereas right now sending one by one, you have no visibility whatsoever.
yeah, I feel like what this gives you is the opportunity that two people could be pushing three tags simultaneously, and you intermix which of the tags from each request are potentially successful if you're not doing it atomically. But compared to what you have today, the existing scenario is even worse. So I feel like we're in a better.
So what I'm hearing is we don't guarantee atomicity. Like if something happens in the middle of the request where someone else overwrites previously written tags, then that's acceptable.
If you want a guarantee, you'd be using a digest.
Right.
And if you got someone else that's overwriting the same tag on top of you, change the pipeline. That's my personal opinion, though. People just don't want to do that, do they? Um, yeah, there are discussions on how many tags per put I'm seeing from Sajay.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, query parameter length is different from URL path length, isn't it? Or is the query parameters are pinned on there for that?
Just to clarify, I think the point is if you have a large number of tags, it would be it would be okay to do it, but it still kind of gets ambiguous if different registries honor different things, and we just have to handle this in different clients. So whatever the recommendation is, I think come with a proposal of, hey, this is the thing that we want to support minimum. That's kind of what I'm hoping. Otherwise, we end up with the same problem like max manifest size again.
Or potentially a denial of service where someone tries to create 1,000 tags in a repository.
Yeah. Oh God, no.
Try millions. Yeah, I mean, I think at some point you are going to hit just URL limits. Yeah, I mean, I think you could probably specify some, at least 10 or 12, I don't know, some reasonable number that sounds not awful. Because yeah, I would say if you're trying to do more than that, maybe it is okay to split it into at least a couple of requests, and page over. It's probably fine. But they can at least throw a number in there and then we can debate it. Go from there.
Yep. Thanks.
Add that to the list of things Tina and I will try to do to break a registry. 10 feels small. I want more than 10. All right. The only last thing on the list here was the TOB election. I think we're coming up on the end of the opening for nominations. So if you are one of the member companies of OCI and someone from your company hasn't nominated you yet and you'd like to be on the TOB, maybe shout out and start making some noise inside the organization to get someone to put your name on the list. This could also be like before, where anybody that's on the list is potentially nominated. Depends on how few we get. We may end up skipping the whole election if we don't have enough people to make an election needed. And that's all I got. Anyone else have other items for the day? All right, you're all quiet. I hope everybody had a nice holiday, and welcome back. And we'll be back again next week and do it all again then. All right. Cheers, everybody.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you.